Our story begins with a coffin floating in the middle of the sea. A fisherman, while catching fish, notices it drifting near his boat. Out of curiosity, he brings the coffin onto his vessel and opens it, only to find the dead body of a queen and, astonishingly, a living baby inside. Seeing the innocent child, the fisherman feels deep pity for him. He decides to keep the baby and raise him as his own son, naming him Perseus. As Perseus grows up, he gradually realizes through small conversations and observations that the fisherman is not his real father. Yet, despite knowing the truth, the fisherman continues to tell him lovingly that he is his true father and his wife is Perseus's mother. Time passes and the story moves forward by 11 years. Perseus has now grown into a young man. One day, he goes fishing with his adoptive parents. The fisherman and his wife knew the kingdom of Argos, hoping to catch something valuable, as they had not been able to find any fish for a long time. The fisherman blames the gods for their misfortune, feeling that divine powers have turned against them. Saddened by this belief, he grows frustrated, but Perseus and his mother try to console him and keep his spirits up. While sailing further, Perseus notices a gigantic statue of Zeus in the city of Argos. To his surprise, soldiers of Argos are pushing the enormous statue into the sea under the orders of their king. The truth is, even the king of Argos was deeply troubled by the gods. In his anger, he had decided that if the gods did not help humans even after receiving their prayers and offering, then worshipping them was meaningless. The moment the statue crashes into the sea, huge waves rise across the water. Dark clouds suddenly gather in the sky, and from the raging sea emerge terrifying, bat-like monsters sent directly from the underworld. These creatures were, in fact, dispatched by the gods themselves to punish those soldiers who had dared to disrespect them. The soldiers try their best to fight back, but their efforts are useless. The monstrous beings tear them apart mercilessly. Then, those demonic creatures merge together, transforming into a single fearsome being, Hades, the ruler of the underworld. Furious that mortals have defied the gods, Hades swears revenge. In his rage, he attacks Perseus's boat, destroying it completely and dragging it beneath the sea. Perseus somehow manages to survive and reach the surface, but no matter how hard he tries, he cannot save the fisherman and his wife. Heartbroken, he climbs onto a piece of broken wood from the wreckage and breaks down in tears, mourning the loss of his parents. Meanwhile, up in the heavens, Zeus becomes aware the mortals have stopped worshipping the gods. Enraged, he realizes that divine immortality depends on human prayers. Without them, their power would begin to fade. At that moment, Hades appears before Zeus and the other gods, informing them about the rebellion of the Argos soldiers and requesting permission to punish the mortals. Zeus, now equally furious, agrees with Hades, deciding that fear must be used to make humans pray again. He grants Hades permission to unleash his wrath upon Argos. Elsewhere, Perseus is discovered unconscious by some surviving Argos soldiers who bring him back to their kingdom. Upon arriving there, Perseus witnesses the terrible conditions of the village: poverty, hunger, and despair everywhere. The suffering of the people fills him with sorrow, but when the soldiers take him to the king's palace, Perseus feels an even deeper disgust. While the villagers live in misery, the palace overflows with luxury, gold, and indulgence. The king, Perseus, spends enormous amounts of wealth solely for his own entertainment, showing no concern for his suffering subjects. When King Perseus hears that Hades destroyed his soldiers after they threw Zeus's statue into the sea, instead of being terrified, he actually rejoices. He believes that if the god's strength comes from human prayers, then by turning away from them, mortals have weakened the god, and now even they must crave devotion. While he is expressing his arrogance, his daughter Andromeda tries to stop him. She warns that his defiance is provoking the god's anger, which is why innocent villagers and soldiers are dying. But Perseus ignores her and insists on taking even bolder actions against the gods. Suddenly, the air grows cold and dark as Hades himself appears in the palace. Using his dark powers, he kills several soldiers on the spot. Furious at the devastation he has caused, Perseus attacks him, but Hades retaliates with immense strength, striking Perseus and hurling him across the hall, trying to kill him. Miraculously, Perseus survives the deadly blow. Then Hades turns to Queen Cassiopeia, draining her life force in an instant, aging her to dust, and declares that no one, not even the king, can save Argos now. He announces that he has unleashed his most powerful creation, the monstrous Kraken, who will rise from the sea in 10 days to annihilate Argos completely. Hades warns Perseus that the only way to save his kingdom is to sacrifice his daughter Andromeda. If she is chained as an offering before the Kraken and prayers of repentance are made, the beast will take her and spare the kingdom. But if not, everyone will perish. Perseus prepares to attack Hades again, but before he can strike, a mysterious woman steps between them, urging him to wait for the right time. Hades smirks and, before vanishing, reveals something that shocks everyone. Perseus is not a mere mortal, but the son of Zeus, a demigod. Hearing this truth leaves Perseus and everyone else in utter disbelief. Meanwhile, Zeus himself becomes aware that his son Perseus is in Argos. Though he knows divine blood runs through Perseus's veins, Zeus hesitates, unsure whether he should help him or let him find his own path. Back in the palace, the commander of Argos's army, Draco, begins interrogating Perseus, suspecting that he might have been sent by the gods to bring even greater destruction upon their land. Perseus denies it, insisting he is just a man. Soon after, King Cepheus arrives. Realizing Perseus is half-divine nature, he believes Perseus might be their only chance to defeat the Kraken and save the kingdom. But Perseus refuses to use any divine powers or accept help from the gods. Andromeda, watching Perseus's torment and inner conflict, senses that a fierce battle is raging within him, a struggle between his human heart and his divine blood. Understanding this, she quietly decides to sacrifice herself to save her people. Andromeda had already made up her mind to sacrifice herself in order to save her people. In exchange, she begged her father King Cepheus to release Perseus, who was still locked away. But because Perseus refused to use his divine powers, the king became furious and ordered him to be thrown into the dungeon. Now imprisoned, Perseus burned with anger and grief. Anger for the loss of his adoptive parents, and a burning desire for revenge against Hades, the god who had caused their deaths. Just then, the mysterious woman named Io, who had earlier stopped him from attacking Hades, appeared before him. She revealed that Perseus truly was the son of Zeus. Io herself was a divine warrior, one of the immortals who served the gods, and she had been watching over Perseus ever since he was a child. In fact, she was the one who had saved him long ago, placing him in the care of the fishermen to protect his life. It was also she who had sent the Argos soldiers to the shore to rescue him after his boat had been destroyed. According to Io, Perseus was destined to kill the Kraken. His birth and every step of his journey had been guided by fate itself. She then began to tell him a story from long ago about how all this began. Once, the gods of Olympus had grown careless and self-indulgent, ignoring humankind completely. In fury, a mortal king rose up, vowing to end the gods' rule. He and his soldiers invaded Mount Olympus itself. This insult enraged Zeus, who decided to humiliate the king in return. One night, Zeus descended to earth, disguised as the king, and entered his palace. Under the cover of darkness, he lay with the king's wife, and from that union, a child was conceived. Not long after, the real king returned home and discovered the truth. Enraged, Zeus laughed and vanished in the form of a bird. But the king's fury burned even hotter. He allowed the child to be born, only to lock both his wife and the newborn in a coffin and throw them into the sea. Zeus, enraged at this cruelty, struck the king with a bolt of lightning, transforming him into a hideous monster. Yet even in that monstrous form, the king managed to hurl the coffin into the ocean, the same coffin that years later would be found by the fishermen, containing the queen's corpse and the infant Perseus. At first, Perseus found it hard to believe Io's story, but her words, her certainty, made him realize that whether or not he accepted his divine blood, his destiny was inescapable. Still, for him, one thing was clear. He would avenge his father's death at the hands of Hades, no matter the cost. Io then explained that Hades' greatest weapon was the Kraken itself, the most powerful beast ever created. Hades had once used the Kraken to defeat the Titans, including his own father. Therefore, if Perseus could destroy the Kraken, he would also be able to weaken and defeat Hades afterward. Hearing this, Perseus agreed. Io then went to Draco, the commander of Argos's army, urging him to take Perseus to the Stygian witches, the only beings who knew how to kill the Kraken. At first, Draco refused, saying that no human had ever made it to their lair alive. It was far too dangerous and distant. But Io reminded him that Perseus was a demigod, the son of Zeus, and could lead them safely through any peril. Convinced, Draco agreed and set out with Perseus, Io, and a small group of soldiers on their perilous journey to find the witches. Meanwhile, Hades learned of their plan. Determined to stop them, he sought out the same king whom Zeus had turned into a monster, the creature now known as Calibos, who had been hiding deep beneath the earth. Calibos too despised Zeus and wished for revenge. Hades promised him power and the chance to kill Zeus's son. In return, Hades granted him dark powers to aid in the hunt. Back on the surface, Perseus, Draco, Io, and the soldiers continued their long trek through dangerous land. Along the way, Draco trained Perseus in swordsmanship. Owing to his divine heritage, Perseus learned with incredible speed, astonishing even Draco himself. Somewhere above, Zeus watched proudly, and perhaps for the first time, smiled upon his son. To aid him, Zeus sent down a divine sword, forged by the gods. Perseus found it in a forest clearing. Its blade glowed faintly with celestial light, but Draco immediately realized it was a gift from Zeus. Perseus, however, refused to accept any help from the gods. He handed the sword back to Draco, saying he wanted to win this fight as a man, not as a god's puppet. As they continued their journey, they came upon a herd of winged horses soaring across the sky. Fascinated, Perseus approached them, but one, a magnificent black horse, landed before him, its wings beating the air furiously. The creature was wild and untamed, glaring at Perseus with defiance. Just then, Io stepped forward gently toward the creature. The black horse finally calms down, because it was a divine creature once gifted to Io by the gods themselves. Long ago, one of the gods had fallen deeply in love with Io, but when she rejected his affection, he cursed her with immortality and banished her from Olympus. Since then, Io had been wandering the earth in secrecy, silently watching over Perseus from afar to protect him. They were still talking when suddenly Perseus hears terrified screams in the distance. He rushes toward the sound and is horrified to see Calibos brutally slaughtering the soldiers one by one. The sight fills Perseus with rage. He charges at Calibos, but before he can strike, Calibos kicks him hard, sending him crashing down from a high ledge. Calibos then leaps toward him, sword raised to kill, but Perseus narrowly dodges the blow and quickly grabs his own weapon. He tries to fight back bravely with his normal sword, but Calibos is far stronger and easily overpowers him. During the fight, Calibos sinks his fangs viciously into Perseus's arm, leaving a deep, bleeding wound. Just then, Draco and a few of his soldiers arrive to help Perseus, but Calibos, consumed with fury, defeats them all effortlessly. He then grabs Perseus by the head, trying to crush his skull with his bare hand. Perseus struggles desperately, but Calibos's grip is too strong. At the last moment, Draco charges forward and slices off Calibos's arm with his blade. Screaming in agony, Calibos staggers back and flees into the wilderness. Everyone begins to chase him, unaware that the severed arm left behind is slowly transforming into a massive scorpion. Even the drops of Calibos's blood splattering across the ground are spawning more scorpions, each one growing bigger and deadlier. Perseus and his companions track Calibos into the desert and finally catch up to him. They surround him and attack fiercely, managing to wound him several times. But before they can finish him off, the ground beneath them starts to tremble violently. Suddenly, a gigantic scorpion bursts out from the sand, roaring as it swings its deadly stinger. Everyone's attention shifts from Calibos to this monstrous new threat, allowing Calibos to slip away. The scorpion immediately attacks, striking Draco's men with its tail and sending them flying through the air. Seeing an opening, Draco jumps onto the creature's back, stabbing his twin daggers deep into its shell. One of his soldiers throws him a spear, and Draco drives it straight through the scorpion's body, finally killing it. But before they can breathe, more scorpions emerge, charging toward them from all sides. The group is forced into another brutal battle. One of the scorpions grabs Perseus in its claws, lifting him high and aiming its venomous stinger at his chest. Just as it's about to strike, Io hurls a rope with a bladed hook from above, slicing off the scorpion's stinger in one clean strike. Enraged, the beast turns its fury on Io and starts chasing her instead. Io runs for her life through the ruins of ancient stone walls, the furious scorpion smashing everything in its path to get to her. Seeing her in danger, Perseus sprints to help. The two run side by side, dodging debris and rubble, but the scorpion is relentless. Finally, Perseus pushes Io aside, shouting at her to stay back, and faces the monster alone. The scorpion leaps through the air, crashing through a wall and slamming down onto Perseus. For a terrifying moment, everyone thinks Perseus has been crushed. But then, the scorpion lets out a horrible shriek, and Perseus bursts out of its belly, covered in its green blood, having sliced his way through the creature from the inside. The soldiers cheer in relief and triumph. Their victory, however, is short-lived. Draco's remaining men come running, shouting that even more giant scorpions are closing in fast. Soon, the group is surrounded, ready to make a final stand, when suddenly, the scorpions stop moving. A strange chanting sound echoes from nearby. From the shadows, a group of mysterious desert beings appear, their eyes glowing blue. Draco warns Perseus to stay back, whispering that these are the Jinn, ancient desert spirits and known enemies of mankind. He can't understand why they've stopped the scorpions or why they seem to be helping. But before anyone can react, Perseus collapses in pain. The wound from Calibos's bite is burning intensely. The poison is spreading fast to his vein. The leader of the Jinn steps forward and, without a word, carries the weakened Perseus and his companions to their desert camp. Inside a large tent, Io tends to Perseus, cleaning his wound and giving him water. When she steps out for a moment, the Jinn leader enters, holding a staff that burns with blue fire. He begins chanting and uses the flame on Perseus's arm. Draco bursts in, thinking the Jinn is trying to harm Perseus, and attacks with his soldiers. But the Jinn easily overpowers them, explaining in a deep, echoing voice that he's not hurting Perseus, he's healing him. The blue fire neutralizes the venom, and Perseus slowly opens his eyes, completely cured. The Jinn leader then reveals his story. They too were once men, cursed by the gods and turned into soulless, blue-eyed beings of fire and sand. They have long awaited someone like Perseus, a demigod who could challenge the gods and end their tyranny once and for all. Hearing this, Draco lowers his weapon, realizing the Jinn are allies, not enemies. By morning, the Jinn tame some of the surviving giant scorpions, using their magic to ride them like beasts of burden. They offer to guide Perseus and his companions across the endless desert toward the mountains where the witches live, the only ones who know how to kill the Kraken. After a long and grueling journey, they finally reach a towering, jagged mountain shrouded in mist and thunder. As they climb higher, the weather turns fierce, the winds howl, and lightning flashes around them. At the summit, they encounter 3 terrifying witches, hideous and blind, sharing a single mystical eye that they pass between themselves to see. When Perseus asks them how to defeat the Kraken, the witches cackle wickedly and demand a sacrifice in exchange for the answer. When Perseus refused their demand, the witches grew furious and tried to attack him. In response, Perseus snatched their single shared eye and threatened to throw it down the mountain. The witches panicked instantly. Without that eye, they would lose all their powers and be left completely blind. Terrified, they begged him to stop and promised to reveal what he wanted to know. They finally told Perseus that to defeat the Kraken, he must journey beyond the world of the living into the realm of death itself and retrieve the head of Medusa, the cursed Gorgon whose very gaze could turn anyone who looked at her into stone. They warned him that no mortal had ever survived facing her. Killing Medusa was impossible. Despite their warnings, Perseus firmly decided to go through with it. He handed back the witch's eye and descended the mountain with his companion. But as soon as they reached the base, several of the soldiers refused to continue the deadly mission and abandoned the group. That night, while the remaining few rested, Perseus wandered off alone. Suddenly, a bright light appeared before him, and from it emerged Zeus himself. The god urged Perseus to give up his reckless plan, insisting that Medusa's lair was a place from which no man had ever returned alive. Instead, Zeus offered him immortality, a place among the gods on Mount Olympus. But Perseus rejected the offer without hesitation. He said he wanted to live and die as a human, not as a god, because he valued mortal life, with all its struggles and meaning, far more than eternal power. Zeus was moved by his words, and with a faint smile, he tossed Perseus a golden coin before disappearing in a flash of lightning. That coin, he said, would be his key to crossing into the world of the dead. When Perseus and his group reached the gates of the underworld, he flipped the golden coin into the air, but the Jinn caught it and threw it into a nearby lake. Immediately, the dark waters began to stir, and a ghostly boat of death rose from the depths, drawn by 2 monstrous creatures. Death itself silently ferried Perseus and his companions across the lake into her shadowy domain, the world of the dead. At the entrance, Perseus told Io to wait outside for his return, as he didn't want her to risk her life. He then went in with Draco, the Jinn, and the remaining men. Inside, everything was pitch dark and eerie. The stone walls were cracked, molten lava flowed beneath the ground, and the air was thick with dread. Scattered everywhere were the stone bodies of those who had dared to enter before, now lifeless statues frozen mid-scream. The group took their positions, some with shields in front, others with bows drawn on the side. Suddenly, a faint slithering echoed through the cavern. One soldier turned to look, and before anyone could blink, his body hardened into stone. Another screamed as an arrow pierced through his chest. Medusa had begun her hunt. She moved swiftly and silently, her serpent hair hissing as she struck down one man after another. Chaos spread through the chamber. In the confusion, one of the Jinn nearly fell into a pool of molten lava, but Perseus grabbed his arm and pulled him to safety just in time. Still, one by one, the warriors fell, either petrified or killed, until only Perseus, Draco, and the Jinn remained alive. Medusa, enraged, moved even faster now. Draco climbed up to a higher ledge, trying to distract her, while Perseus and the Jinn ran below. Perseus hid the Jinn behind a broken pillar and ran across the chamber to draw Medusa's attention toward himself. She slithered after him, her eyes glowing with deadly power. As she passed the pillar, the Jinn tried to ambush her, but before he could strike, Medusa turned and fixed her gaze upon him. However, her power didn't work on him. His enchanted blue eyes made him immune to her curse. Seizing the moment, the Jinn unleashed his final attack, sacrificing himself in a massive explosion of blue flame that wounded Medusa badly. But she wasn't dead yet. Draco, seeing his chance, leapt down from above with a heavy stone, crashing onto Medusa's tail and pinning her to the ground. Furious, she turned her gaze upon him, turning Draco into stone instantly, then shattered his statue with a single strike. Now filled with rage and sorrow, Perseus raised his polished bronze shield, using its reflection to track Medusa's movements without meeting her deadly eyes. He waited until she crept close, the serpents hissing inches from his face. Then, closing his eyes, he swung his sword in a perfect arc. One clean strike, and Medusa's head was severed from her body. Her monstrous body collapsed into the lava, and the cave fell silent. Perseus stood still for a moment, grief-stricken by the loss of all his companions. Then he carefully wrapped Medusa's head and carried it outside, where Io waited. Io smiled with relief upon seeing him alive, but before Perseus could say a word, Calibos suddenly appeared and stabbed Io through the stomach. She collapsed to the ground, bleeding and gasping. Furious, Perseus attacked Calibos. Even with one arm missing, Calibos fought with savage strength. Perseus spotted Zeus's divine sword lying nearby, the one he had once rejected, and picked it up. Their fierce battle raged on until Perseus struck Calibos several times, draining his dark power. Calibos's monstrous form faded, and he fell to the ground as a human once more, lifeless and broken. Perseus rushed to Io's side, cradling her in his arms. She weakly smiled and told him not to mourn for her, but to hurry to Argos, where the people were about to be slaughtered by the Kraken. "Today is the 10th day," she whispered. "Save them, Perseus, or all our sacrifices will be for nothing." With those final words, Io took her last breath. Her immortal body dissolved into golden dust, scattering into the wind. Perseus was devastated. He had grown to love her deeply. But just then, Pegasus, the divine winged horse, descended from the sky, the same one that once belonged to Io. Understanding what Io wanted, Perseus mounted Pegasus and soared toward Argos at full speed. Back in Argos, fear had overtaken the city. Perseus had not yet returned, and in desperation, King Cepheus had decided to sacrifice his daughter Andromeda, chaining her to a cliff as an offering to the Kraken. And now, from the depths of the ocean, the monstrous Kraken was rising, roaring as it began to destroy everything in its path. At the same time, Olympus was also being destroyed. It was then that Hades reveals to Zeus that he had actually deceived the gods, because the more destruction the Kraken caused in the real world, the stronger it would become. That was the reason he had caused suffering to humans and provoked Zeus against him. Hearing this, Zeus became extremely angry. However, Hades himself was immensely powerful, so even Zeus could not face him directly. Meanwhile, Perseus reached the kingdom of Argos. Upon learning this, Hades himself came to stop him. During this, the giant bat-like monsters that had once taken Medusa's head from Perseus attacked him again, but Perseus defeated them, reclaimed Medusa's head, and, before the Kraken could destroy Andromeda, turned the Kraken to stone and killed it. During this, as the Kraken's body turned to stone and broke apart upon hitting the ground, some people died, and Andromeda fell into the sea. Because her hands were bound, she could not get out. At that moment, Hades appeared before Perseus. Enraged, Perseus sought Zeus's help and asked for the lightning from his sword. Using this lightning, he launched a powerful attack on Hades and sent him back to the underworld. Afterward, Perseus dove into the sea to save Andromeda, successfully rescuing her. Upon emerging, Andromeda immediately proposed marriage to Perseus. However, he gently refused because he was still in love with Io. After returning Andromeda to the kingdom of Argos, Zeus returned to Perseus. Since Perseus had defeated both Hades and the Kraken, saving both humans and Olympus, Zeus revived Io for him so that Perseus could live a happy life with the woman he loved. And with that, the story comes to an end. If you enjoyed this adventure, make sure to smash that like button. Let's see if we can hit 1,000 likes for this video. Don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling stories, because I bring exciting adventures like this regularly. I'll see you soon with another epic tale. Until then, take care and goodbye.
Hello friends, if you like this video, please do like, share and subscribe.